The Reaper Nurses and Dread Duckies are the same monster. This is a claim that makes no sense. They are clearly completely different in about every way. But despite this, I believe that I have found evidence that proves that these two monsters are actually one in the same. This is the sexy duck theory. And yes, that's actually what I'm calling it. Before we begin the theory, let's just go ahead and clear some things up. Dark Deception is a Pac-Man style horror game where you go around collecting little gemstones called soul shards in order to unlock the pieces to a ring called the Riddle of Heaven, in the hopes that you can use the ring's power to get a second chance at life. Meanwhile, throughout the game, you are being pursued by various monsters which will relentlessly hunt you down. In this video, I'm going to be talking about specifically the level 4 monsters, Dread Duckies, and the level 6 monsters, Reaper Nurses. With that out of the way, let's start the theory. So how did I come to the conclusion that these two monsters were actually the same? It all started when I was listening to the Dark Deception soundtrack, and I noticed something strange. Every monster in the game has their own unique chase theme that plays when they spot the player, except when it comes to the Reaper Nurses and Dread Duckies. Confused? Well, take a listen for yourself. Here's the chase theme for the ducks. And here is the chase theme for the nurses. That's right, both monsters have the same melody in their chase themes. Now, at first, I kind of joked about this, like, oh, what if the Reaper Nurses are actually Dread Duckies? But then the idea took on a bit of a different tone when I asked the question, what if the Dread Duckies are actually Reaper Nurses? Okay, but how would this even be possible? Every monster gets their own distinct nightmare powered by a different ring piece. Not only that, but the E-notes completely contradict this theory. The Dread Duckies contain the souls of liars, while the Reaper Nurses are the souls of misandrist women. These two contradictions annoyed me so much going into this, because it all just felt like one big cockblock to my whole theory. But then I started to think about it. The ring pieces are not used to create the monsters. They are used to create the nightmares themselves. Once a ring piece is removed, the nightmare collapses and the monsters lose their home. Or at least, it's implied that they do. We've also seen from levels like Crazy Carnival and Torment Therapy that monsters can enter other levels, meaning that the Dread Duckies could have actually stemmed from level 6. Alright, so that's one contradiction out of the way, but what about the E-notes? In E's notes, she tells us that the ducks and nurses are two completely different soul types. So, does this disprove my theory? Fucking no it doesn't! Think about it. E is immortal. She has no knowledge of how this realm works besides from what she learns on her journey throughout the nightmares. There is no way that she can just look at a monster and say, yep, that's a liar right there, and get it right every time. To give her some credit though, she does seem to have good intuition about this stuff, but we can't exactly take her word for it. Plus, I think I have an idea of how she came to this conclusion, but I'll save that for later. With these two contradictions out of my way, it's time to prove why these monsters are in fact the same. Back to the similarity between the two chase themes. After I noticed this, more and more similarities started to become clear. First off is the obvious similarity, being the legs. Besides Agatha, these are the only two monsters to have human legs. We never see the rest of the Dread Duckies' bodies, so we're only left to assume that it's something humanoid. Which brings us to the second similarity, the fact that they both hide their appearance. Dread Duckies conceal themselves within their duck shells, and the Reaper nurses put bags over their heads to hide their faces. We don't know why Reaper nurses hide their faces, but my guess is probably because they are ashamed of how they look. Despite hating men, Reaper nurses still seem to enjoy their attention based on the intro to their level. So it's reasonable to assume that they're actually ugly, and they hide that fact by wearing bags over their heads so that they can continue being eye candy for men. If we look at the Dread Duckies in this light, then their whole bodies are probably very ugly. So to combat this, they wear a duck costume since ducks are cute, and they'll draw in the most attention. Similarity number 3, the stun ability. One of the core abilities of the Dread Duckies is their ability to bite onto the player, stunning them. Though there's something odd about this ability. When they bite you, they don't latch on, or even hurt you for that matter. You're just stunned and there's no real explanation why. I propose that the reason for this is that they are attacking you with some sort of venom. And does that remind you of anything? The Reaper nurses stun you in their level through the usage of some sort of gas. I believe that the Dread Duckies are using the same toxins that they used when they were nurses to stun the player. With that, let's talk about the final main similarity, the dancing. When we first enter Torment Therapy, we're introduced to the Reaper nurses' seductive nature through the dances they perform for Doug. This ties back into the point I made about them being attention seekers. As you probably already noticed, the Dread Duckies are also well known for dancing. It's always been a bit of an odd and silly trait, so why do they do this? Because it draws in the attention of the player. It's also why the Dread Duckies don't immediately kill the player after stunning them. It's because they want the player to watch them dance. Also, this is a less impressive connection, but the dance the Dread Duckies do is slightly similar to one of the dances the Reaper nurses perform. Okay, so there's clearly a lot of similarities between the two, but there's still one more thing that's kind of annoying about this theory: Doom Ducky and the Matron. Basically, in every level, there's a boss monster that will appear at the very end of the level and try to finish off the player. We don't really have much information about these boss monsters, but I think I might know what they are. In Barely Buried, we figure out from the E-notes that Mama Bear is a massive collection of the abusive mother soul type, and Mama Bear also happens to be the boss monster of the level. I'm not really sure what the trigger teddies are supposed to be, but they're not important to this theory, so I won't get into that. From what we know about Mama Bear, we can reasonably assume that each boss monster is also a collection of their monster's soul type. So if what I'm saying about the ducks and nurses is true, does that mean that Doom Ducky is another matron? Well, probably. From what we know about the Dread Duckies with this theory in mind, under their suits, they are extremely deformed and ugly, which is exactly what we see with Doom Ducky. Doom Ducky is very obese, which is an interesting parallel to the matron, and the many hands on Doom Ducky all have gloves on them. If the ducks originated from Torment Therapy, it makes sense that they would have gloves on them. Doom Ducky, being a matron, would also explain how Doom Ducky manages to move so fast throughout the halls of Stranger Sewers. Maybe it's using the same segue the matron has to help propel itself through the water. We never do see Doom Ducky's stomach after all. And if you still don't believe that Doom Ducky and the matron are the same monster, then take a listen to these two voice lines.
Oh, now that's a huge ducky. Now that's a huge woman.
Bierce makes the same remark about both bosses, almost like the game's trying to hint at the fact that these two bosses are actually the same. Just like how the Dread Duckies are deformed Reaper nurses, Doom Ducky is a matron that is heavily deformed, and it has to hide its body inside a duck suit to keep the player from seeing what it really looks like. So, what is really going on here? If the Dread Duckies really are Reaper nurses, why are they in the sewers? Well, I think I might have a theory. A reason why the two monsters are separated. Get comfortable, cause it's story time. Before the existence of Stranger Sewers, there were two types of Reaper nurses. Beauty nurses, monsters stem from the deep hatred for men, and ugly nurses, remnants of women who stem from toxic love. The type of woman who will just use men for their money and cheat on their significant others. Liars. It was through their cruel nature that their appearance in death took on a much uglier form. The beauty nurses looked down on the ugly nurses. Their grotesque forms too disgusting to look at. With the ugly nurses around, the beauty nurses never got the attention that they craved. People would be too afraid to go near the hospital with the ugly nurses around. After some time, the ugly nurses were banished from torment therapy. Because of this, the ugly nurses were brought to a separate level, flushed away like the waste the beauty nurses saw them as. The ugly nurses had nothing left, but Malik came to them with a solution. Duck costumes to disguise their disgusting nature, and were given a new alias, Dread Duckies. He did provide a bit of an overabundance of them, however, hence why there are so many empty costumes lying around. Now the Dread Duckies roam the sewers, searching for the attention that they never got in torment therapy for the rest of eternity. But even now, there are still faint remembrances of the deceitful, cruel woman that they used to be. And that is why, when you are spied by the Dread Duckies, you can still make out the chase theme of the Reaper nurses. That is the Sexy Duck Theory. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for listening to my ramblings until the end. I've wanted to dip my toes into theory crafting for a while now, and I thought this would be a great theory to start with because of its simplicity, and because this game is kind of my current special interest. I think in the end, I was able to put together a convincing narrative even with the little amount of information I had. Chapter 5 of Dark Deception is on the horizon, and plenty of other stuff is coming out soon, so maybe my theory will get confirmed or disproved later. If this video does well, then I might do more theories in the future about different media, or maybe I'll do more theories regardless, because this is kind of fun. Be sure to check out my other videos. I do a lot of other Dark Deception videos if you want to see more of that. Oh, and let me know if you have any problems or questions about this theory in the comments. I'll do my best to answer any questions. But yeah, that's all I've really got to say. See you in the next video.